now.
Hi, everybody. Happy February. This is Lisa Bouchard with Keller Williams. I'm here today to talk about a few challenges that we're facing in this 2021 market. We're going to get the buyers and sellers ready for the great spring market. I have Liz and Dana with me today. Liz is an attorney in the Boston and north of Boston area, right? I'm not sure, Liz, do you do New Hampshire also?
No. Well,
No.
we do, but
Okay.
not me personally.
Okay, I'm licensed in Mass and New Hampshire, and so is Dana. So that's that. And we're just going to be asking questions. So I'm going to ask Dana, pre-approval. I know pre-approval is one of the first steps we go to when we're purchasing a home. And what's the difference between a pre-approval and a pre-qual? What do we need?
Yeah,
What does a buyer need?
Great question. So my name's Dana Cabral, by the way. I am with Draper and Kramer Mortgage, and been in the business since 2004. So a long time, but yeah, it's been a great ride. So just wanted to put that out there. Work with first-time home buyers, experienced buyers, you name it. So great question, Lisa. A pre-qualification really is, I'm just going to be blunt and say it's kind of useless. You need a formal pre-approval in this market, in any market really, but in this market especially, it's a waste of time to just have something that says somebody's pre-qualified unless it's actually gone through and supporting docs have been received, reviewed, approved, put through underwriting, at least automated underwriting and reviewed. Then at that point, you know, you don't have a pre-approval. So you want to make sure you always have a pre-approval. It's so key. It's really the first step in the process too. When you're starting to think about buying, you may contact a realtor first, and that's great. But the realtor may say, well, did you get pre-approved, or do you have anybody that you're looking to work with for, you know, pre-approval? And that's what you need to do. You need to get that done first. And then once that's done, you can pound the pavement, hit the ground running. But pre-approval, formal pre-approval is very important. And really that's the most painful part of the process, just getting some of the supporting docs over. After that, it's just finding your house, and you know you can go into it confident that you're going to be able to buy versus wondering, well, did that info I gave over the phone that the person I spoke with on the other end scratch padded on a piece of paper really give me what I need to be able to go buy? So
I feel like a lot of people, they are hesitant necessarily, maybe who aren't informed and don't want to necessarily spend the time. But if you don't spend the time on that in particular, the amount of time that can be wasted based off of something that's just a piece of paper that says you qualify for something that you have zero business qualifying for is the greater waste of your time, and also your hopes and dreams, because people then can get to that expectation of wanting to buy a certain amount of home, which they will never be able to qualify for if somebody actually did the due diligence needed to figure that out.
100%. Yep, absolutely. All right, well, on that, so Lisa, I see your question and I raise you a question. So I'm going to give you a question. How do I start the process of buying a home, and how long will it take?
Okay. Usually I will sit down with the buyer. Once you select your agent, you're going to sit down with that agent and, you know, determine the towns you want to live in, determine the criteria, what type of a home. Give me your must-haves, you know, whether it's a garage. And then I'd say it takes about 45 days from the day we put the offer in to the day we close. What are your thoughts, Liz? Can you do quicker?
Yeah.
So what about normal?
Yeah, I feel like that's probably about normal. Nowadays, especially with it being so competitive out there, I feel like we do see some people putting like really tight turn times of 30 days or less
Yep.
sometimes just to get that offer accepted. And just make sure you talk to your lender before that, offer submission like that, because and even your attorney, because for us, we try and order title as quickly as possible, even before the purchase and sale agreement gets signed, but there's still things that we need to wait for. And similar to Dana needs to wait for an appraisal. And if the appraisals are jammed up, which they have been for quite a while, that 20-day that you're giving him is not going to be possible. And it's not his fault. It's, things out of his control. So, but in terms of, I think from the whole buying process, I feel like I've talked to clients recently. I had one client that was like, oh, we're kind of just casually looking. And then they found something and in like a week they were under agreement. Whereas I have other people that I ask and they're like, oh, it's been a year, to find that place or to get an offer accepted. So it's it just varies so much.
Yeah, and just can I piggyback on that a little bit? So it's important to work with a lender that prioritizes purchases. Certainly, it's a refi boom right now. Everybody is refinancing because rates are great. So that's great. You want to make sure the lender is not overwhelmed with refi volume to the point where they can't meet those aggressive dates. Absolutely. So we separate those. In fact, there's a totally different underwriting process for purchases that go through a streamlined process. And, there are things, if it's a competitive situation or if somebody's been working with a lender and the deal falls through and they have to come through. I've had people referred over with 2 weeks left. The dates are still in place though. And then what do? So we rush that through, and we have been able to do it. Naturally, it's not the norm. Right. But it can be done. And, we're seeing, 30-day closings all the time. I like to say 30 days post-inspection, unless inspection is waived, which is another whole thing that I think we're going to talk about. But yeah. So anyways, just wanted to add that.
Yeah, that's super important for people to understand that it's possible, but no one ever, I feel like all of us say anything is possible, but don't put us in that position all the time. Right.
Right.
And in that perspective, so I feel like there's so many misconceptions still out there with home buyers that say 20% down. Yeah. I don't have it, so I'm not buying, and I'm going to continue to pay my $3,000 a month rent. Can you kibosh that?
I can kibosh that. Yeah, I mean, totally not necessary to put 20% down. With Draper and Kramer, for example, we work with Mass Housing, New Hampshire Housing, even just standard Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, if you're not over certain income limits, through Home Ready or Home Possible. There's these conventional programs that'll allow you to get even lower than market rates and real low PMI. But even if you're overqualified for that, you can put as little as 3% down. And obviously, if you're a veteran, 0%, and USDA similar. So there are programs out there depending on a lot of different things. It's just, that's where the whole pre-approval process comes into play, where you find all this out at the beginning. And then, a thorough loan officer is going to say, hey, you qualify for this, this, and this, and this. My recommendation based on my experience would be this, but everybody's got different goals. Some people may not want to, they might have 20% down, but they want to save a cushion, especially in times of COVID where, one borrower could be on the fence with their job or whatever. They want to have that. So they don't want to put down all their money, or they might want to put some money into the house or buy some furniture. So yeah, by all means, you can go less. And then, of course, there's always FHA 3.5%. To go that route as well. But yeah, there's definitely more options than 20%. So, all right. So, Liz, I'm going to ask you, do I need an attorney to buy a home?
Question. So you guys both do work extensively in both New Hampshire and Massachusetts. So for those of you who are watching who are in New Hampshire, no, you don't need an attorney there. In Massachusetts, yes, you have to have an attorney here. So our legislature has actually deemed the closing itself and the role as settlement agent for the bank to be the practice of law, meaning that if if you're getting a mortgage and you are, if you're getting a mortgage, period, you have to have an attorney conduct the closing for the bank. The majority of the time, we actually act in sort of a dual capacity role where we're not only representing the buyer, but also their bank. In Massachusetts too, that has been found to not be a conflict of interest, and we're able to conduct that, obviously because the goals of both the bank and the borrower are in line. So the buyer wants to close on time, and the bank wants to close on time. The buyer wants to buy clean title. The bank wants clean title on the property that they are lending on. So the goals are really in line with each other. And so that's why we're permitted to in Massachusetts. And at the end of the day, I would say 99% of the time we are acting in that dual role, not only for sort of ease of communication, so you know exactly who it is that is handling both parts, but also cost savings, as most practitioners, not all, but most practitioners do offer some sort of incentive or discounted rates when they're acting in that sort of dual capacity role, which is important. So in Massachusetts, yes, it is a requirement to have an attorney, and it just gives you that sort of comfort also knowing that somebody's actually actively negotiating the documents for you, and that you're going to be protected throughout the process.
Right. Awesome.
Does that answer your question?
It does very thoroughly.
Okay, cool. And actually, maybe pushing over to Lisa for a quick question. So I think a lot of people, especially nowadays, are hearing about the market. Oh my gosh, it's so competitive. 70, offers on a property, or, lines down the street for
it's the truth.
For the open houses.
Yeah.
How can you make things competitive, or what are some tips that you've been able to help your buyers get those offers accepted?
Well, find an experienced agent, educated agent, an agent with a good reputation, because there's gonna be issues. But there's a few things. I tell people, keep it simple. Keep your offer simple. Do not put a bunch of contingencies in the offer. They're risks. If you have a house to sell, that's a contingency. That is a risk to the seller of the home that you're going to purchase. If they have 18, 20 offers and you have a house to sell, you're a risk. They have no tolerance for that. The other thing is we deal with escalation clauses. It is a must, almost. And you will be paying 5 to 10%. The escalation clause, I usually say, be prepared to pay 5 to 10% over the highest offer. I usually put an exact amount. So if it's a $400,000 home, be prepared to pay an additional $40,000 more for that property. The escalation clause would read something to the effect of buyer will pay $2,500, $3,500, $4,500 over the highest offer. And then again, make the terms good. Make the terms good. Nothing too detailed, nothing too complicated in your offer.
Yeah.
Make it straightforward. If you can waive home inspection, do it. I don't advise it in some cases, but it helps.
Yeah.
Appraisal, if you can waive the appraisal, do that. And then I'm gonna now bring it to Dana. What are your thoughts, and how much? I mean, I know they need to have a lot of money down in order to waive that appraisal. Fill me in.
Well, to waive the appraisal, right? So that's what when you say waive the appraisal, you mean like, they still get an appraisal, but if it doesn't appraise, you're still going to buy the house, right? If
Correct.
it appraises lower. So,
Correct.
you can put, you can put any amount of money down and still have that be the case, as long as you have the additional funds to pay the difference between what the house appraises at and what the actual price is, assuming the seller won't work with you. You know, if something doesn't appraise in this market, sellers are probably going to be a little bit more reluctant to work with people because it's just going to be a backup offer and a backup offer and a backup offer, or you know, or somebody else. However, you know, saying that, you know, they're probably going to run into the same thing over and over again. If you run into a bunch of stubborn buyers or buyers that are smart, that don't want to overpay per se for a house that doesn't appraise. It's one thing to pay over asking, which most people are doing right now. But it's another thing to overpay, you know, beyond appraisal. So, you know, there's no set down payment per se. However, if someone has 20% down, or they have more money and they put, let's say they do a 3% down situation or a 5% down, and the house doesn't appraise, well, they have the funds to make up the difference. If they're putting 20% down and it doesn't appraise, they can lower it to 10% down and make up the difference. There's flexibilities, of course, in that particular case. You're looking at, you know, PMI, but there's even ways to deal with PMI, lender paid or borrower paid PMI up front, to just wipe out the PMI with one small payment. Not always small, depends on credit score, but you know, that's all the stuff we get into with the pre-approval. And then again, if we come back to it and then they come back to me and say, well, the offer would be accepted if we went with this, what do our numbers look like now? I just tweak the numbers and I give them those options as far as paying that out. So there are options. It's a slippery slope, I'm not going to lie, to go over that, but it is doable. It's totally doable. So, all right, let's see. Lisa, well, you kind of answered this. What if I have to sell a home? What if I have a home to sell? You mentioned the contingencies. So, you know, now let me just say this, and I'll hand it off to you still, but I just want to say, when I'm doing a pre-approval, I think, you know, most experienced lenders, when they're doing a pre-approval, they take into consideration the fact that they own a home. And in many cases, people can carry the home they own and the new home for a short time. But if the ratios work, then you can take that contingency out of the mix, because you know it's gonna sell. It just may not sell before you know, aggressively pursue the new home. So therefore, you just take that out as a contingency because they can afford to do it. So, you know,
that's the cleanest and least stressful way.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Sure.
Absolutely.
No risk. Well, no risk for the seller.
Right. So it all comes down to risk. The seller is going to take the cleanest thing, and obviously the highest, but the cleanest. Sometimes it's cleanest over highest, right?
Correct. A lot.
Yeah.
A lot of the times we don't always go with the highest. It's about the terms.
Right. Exactly. That's so important. So,
and even just from a perspective of what you were talking about a little bit before, Lisa, was sort of reputation and sort of a knowledgeable agent. It's so important. I mean, I've definitely heard stories from people who are list agents saying, oh, well, you know, I actually accepted that offer because it was Lisa over at KW, you know, or, hey, I have, you know, a pre-approval from Dana. These, you know, everybody here is really well known in the market too, and that carries a lot of weight too. So having someone, I feel like lenders, especially, you know, instead of going to that, you know, bank down the street that you just walk in and someone hands you a pre-qual, but having someone who has the experience that Dana has and can actually walk you through a process is huge. And for a listing agent who's maybe looking at 5 identical offers, because let's face it, that's potentially, especially if, you know, everyone's trying to put their best foot forward, maybe they all have the same down payment, maybe they have the same exact terms, but it's that one little thing. Oh, you know, I worked with Dana that one time and that was a really easy process. That could be the winning factor. It's sometimes as simple as that, right?
Absolutely. It's important. It's important to, reputation's huge, and, you know, a local lender. I certainly never try to, you know, win over business by bashing, you know, other lenders. That being said, I'll say that some of the bigger, well-known, you know, nationwide,
the .com, the ones
the .com ones, and the ones that are associated with spaceships and things. You know,
Go to a person. I tell my
They're
people,
great at
go
what,
to somebody.
right. They have a niche, but you know, what you're dealing with in those cases is an order taker. You know, it really is. Someone just, you know, they have a script and they're answering questions. They don't know that maybe, you know, if somebody's approved for FHA financing, that there's a 90-day flip rule, or these different things that can then, that just come with experience that can bite you. And you want someone that's able to kind of, you know, negotiate that and walk you through that, so that when you go out there, you're confident that what you're putting in for an offer. I've had, I'll tell you what, I've had agents I've worked with that come back and they'll tell their buyers, they'll say, look, you got a pre-approval from so-and-so. I'm not using it. You're calling this person. And it's not steering. It's not, you know, it's in their best interest. They'll usually give 3 names, but still they can call in these 3 local people. And that's who you're going to work with, because I know they'll get the job done. So yeah,
it makes a huge difference. You know, or even just the simple concept of, you know, a physical bank that they're not mortgage. That's one facet of their business. They have, you know, they have to open up a certain amount of checking accounts, savings accounts. Yeah, it's like one part of what they do. How can you be the best at that? You can't. You're going to be pretty good at everything.
Yeah.
But having someone, and like Draper and Kramer, all they do is mortgages. I mean, it just, same thing with attorneys. If there are plenty of attorneys out there who are wonderful, you know, human beings and very capable people, but maybe they have a general practice and they do a little bit of everything. They're not going to be as thorough or you know, maybe responsive as someone who lives and breathes real estate every day.
Yeah, that's so important. Definitely.
Yeah. So I'm just looking through to see if there were any other questions that we may have not. Well, I think we talked a little bit about local lender versus national is a huge point. One thing that I actually didn't mention, and the fact that someone is local, that you can like deliver documents or picks up the phone and it's the same person, versus, you know, having to call 1-800 number and whoever's kind of picking up the phone that day. That's huge.
That day or that night or that weekend or that Sunday morning or that Sunday night during the football game, or whenever the text comes in, hey, you know what, we need to be available when people are out looking, not on the same off hours as most people are off, unless they work second or third shift, because that's when they're looking. So if we're not able to crank out a letter on the weekend or be there to crank out a scenario if it's on the edge, then, you know, that's no good. So that's, you know, that's definitely important. Can we talk about commitment letters versus, you know, with conditions versus commitment letters without conditions?
Let's please do that.
This is so important. I see people get these commitment letters sometimes and they're loaded with conditions. That's not a commitment letter. That's a conditional approval. So what's the problem with that? Well, there's a few things. If you get a conditional commitment letter and you let it go over to the list agent and they see all these conditions, and now you're past your commitment date, your loan commitment date, your deposit is now in jeopardy because it's conditional. And you know, it doesn't matter if you feel the house is going to appraise and the appraisal hasn't come in yet. It doesn't matter if the gift funds really haven't been given yet at that point, but I know it's going to happen. I've seen things blow up after commitment. So it's always important, if that's the case and there's things outstanding, to extend it. But I will say that even that leaves a sour taste in sellers' mouths. They don't want to be extending commitments because it's them. What's the problem? Why are they extending? Oh my gosh, I should have went with the other offer. It should be on time and clean, unless there's a condition on their homeowner's insurance binder or something like that. Other than that, it should be clean of all financial, all pre-funding conditions should be cleared, with the exception of those tiny ones, like I said. So,
and if I could just speak to that too. So first thing about attorneys, I've been on other sides of transactions where I see sort of these family lawyers, someone who, you know, is a family friend who doesn't really practice real estate 100%. They get a commitment letter. It's not a firm commitment. And they just expect, oh, well, we got a commitment letter. They don't read it, and things have blown up because after the commitment date passes, they realized, oh my gosh, I didn't read this. I assumed that it was a commitment letter. So that being said, my favorite line is, all commitments are not created equal, because depending on who is issuing it, who meaning what institution is issuing it, some commitment letters are like super squeaky clean, like you said, insurance maybe. Final verification of employment, those things that can't be done beforehand.
Right.
Where others, they have tax transcripts they're still waiting for. The gift funds need to clear. And what happens if that, the person who was going to give the gift lost their job, they can't give a gift anymore. Like, there's so many things. So one of our roles as the attorney for the buyer is that we track that deadline. And in the morning, we're asking the lender for it. If we don't get it by the afternoon, we're asking again, or we're extending until we know we can verify that commitment letter is clear. And we will actually read it. Again, it's amazing how many people don't look at it. They just assume, oh, I got this piece of paper that says commitment on top, I'm good. But if unfortunately you have a team that thinks that way, there could be an issue in the future. And like you said, your deposit could be at risk, which is, not the ideal. So having a team that understands that is huge. And we always try and be very upfront with the other side, because like you said, it can leave sour tastes in people's mouths. But if you're upfront, and you can not obviously divulging the client's personal information, but even just telling them earlier in the day that this may be something that we're waiting on, does volumes for sort of versus at 4:55 we're sending an extension. The seller side is going to be really upset with that. So little things like that can kind of ease the blow, but at the end of the day, it's better that you're protected versus having the seller be a little bit upset. We always err on the side of protecting.
Yes.
But I'm so glad you brought that point up.
Yeah. Communication's huge.
Definitely. Well, we're creeping up at the end here. Maybe just a couple of last words of sort of home buying best practices, maybe.
What do you think, Lisa?
Yeah, again, I would say just hire a professional. Communication, someone that can communicate. And, we're a team here. I bet between all of us, we've got 40, 50 years of experience.
Yeah.
I have, I'm going on 30 years of experience.
Yeah.
So that helps. And best of luck out there in this crazy time. And
yes, absolutely.
Call us if you need anything.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's important to have a team. One thing just that Lisa just said, I know we're wrapping up, but a team that works well together and communicates well on your behalf is always important. You never want to have a team of people that doesn't answer the phone or doesn't communicate, especially as dates come up, but all the time, really. Just communication, and speaking on terms that you understand as a buyer versus all these fancy terms that we could be throwing out there. And then you feel like, wow, I don't really understand that, but I'm embarrassed to ask what that means. Speaking on meeting you where you're at. I always say that.
Totally. I think that is so important, especially, for our two roles, especially because I feel like a lot of people, they do internalize their questions because they have a fear of, asking something that they should already know. And, having that rapport with someone and having that conversation and explaining, like, we're talking maybe in this way because we do this every day. You don't do this every day. So it's totally okay to have questions. It's totally okay to question everything, and we encourage it. So home buyers out there or sellers, if you have any questions for either of us, all three of us will be tagged in this post, but feel free to direct message us or call us, email us, whatever you need. Get your questions answered, and we hope that we can be part of your home buying process.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Good to see you all.
Yeah, you too. Thanks for your time.
Thanks for doing this.
Of course, have a great one.
And
Bye-bye.
Take care.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Nina. Bye.
Bye, Lisa.